Hi there, and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. I'm going to talk to you about something completely different to what I normally talk to you about, and I haven't done this for some months actually. The war in Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine, the invasion of Russia into a sovereign nation. Now, I am still obsessed with Ukraine, and I've written on it recently on Only Sky to say that we shouldn't get the fatigue, Ukraine war fatigue, because it's still really important to keep this in our the forefront, because otherwise we will stop giving military and other financial and practical aid to Ukraine, and that will give Russia the upper hand, and we don't want that to happen. We, for the long-term security of the world, really, Russia needs to be put in its place. And I want to speak to you about this famed Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kherson because it's absolutely genius. Now, and I just got to get this off my chest. Now, I don't know whether it was genius right from its inception. I don't know whether this was intended as genius from the get go, but it's ended up being genius with some events that are rumored to be taking place right now. It's just hot off Twitter and the interwebs. So if the rumors are correct, then it's absolutely brilliant. I have to give you a little bit of a background first because, some of you might not be so interested, might not care, might not know, and whatever. But I think this is really interesting. And this will be the sort of thing that will be taught in the military history books for generations to come if this all pans out and if it works. So originally, what happened in Ukraine? Well, Russia invaded. They were intending on taking Kiev within 3 days, and then the whole country within sort of 15 days, and having a sort of a relatively simple, deposing of one government and an implementation of their own. It didn't happen, and what happened is they got as far as Kiev, and they were beaten back from there. They had logistical problems, and see a couple of my earlier videos to find out about that. But they had heaps of logistical problems, and they weren't expecting there to be the defense that there was. And in fact, they just completely misread Ukraine as a whole, and it was just a gargantuan cock up. So what happened is that they retreated to broadly this area here where they've been for several months really getting nowhere. They are what the Russian tactics are very slow advance, but you can argue successful in certain manners because what they do is they moonscape settlements, which means that they just bomb them, artillery, flatten them so it looks like the surface of the moon, and then slowly advance a small number of troops over that because there's nothing left. And they keep doing that to places, but then of course, what's the long-term sustainability of that, or at least what future are they giving to these places if they're flattening them, and then they're going to have to presumably rebuild them and run them as an occupied territory. So it's kind of bizarre, but that's their tactics, and those have been their tactics all along these various fronts. Now, these two areas, Donetsk and Luhansk, make up what's called the Donbass, and they've been fighting over that. Well, what happened in 2014 is they invaded basically the Donbass, took over large areas of the Donbass and Crimea, and Crimea is really important because it's got Sevastopol, which is this naval base down here. Now, as soon as they took over Crimea in 2014, the Ukrainians cut off freshwater supply, which is supplied from rivers in Kherson Oblast, the kind of region of Kherson. And they supply freshwater to Crimea. And that's a real problem. That huge, vast area, which has, quite a bit of agriculture and all sorts of stuff going on, can't get fresh water. And so when they came to invade in this offensive that's going on now, months back, the Kherson was one of the first places they took, and they needed that for the water. But then the idea was to march on to Odessa, which is a really important port and historical cultural landmark, and they would control all of this coastal area, which means that they would basically control Ukraine because Ukraine couldn't do any of its sort of trading through the Black Sea. They'd have this really important Black Sea naval port, but also all these other ports and areas along the Black Sea, and the Sea of Azov. And Mariupol is over here, and that was their intention. And they succeeded, and it was all looking, like it was going to be real trouble for the Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians put up fierce resistance, and it's broadly stayed like this for months. Kharkiv area, the second city of Ukraine, is called Kharkiv, and it's being cleared back somewhat. But again, that's contested quite heavily at the moment. So that's the situation now. What happened? And lots more. There's lots more to say, but I want to keep this relatively quick. Now, here's the genius. What happened is several weeks back, Ukraine announced that they were going to do a counteroffensive in the Kherson Oblast, and that's a kind of a bizarre thing to announce, because if you're going to do a counteroffensive, really you want surprise on your side, or you want other things to work really in your favour, but Ukraine didn't seem to have that. So announcing their coming counteroffensive, it seemed like a really odd thing to do, and people were sort of trying to wonder why this was taking place. And it could have been that spies have found out there's a counteroffensive amassing, so they might as well tell everyone because everyone knew anyway, or these sort of different reasons. But one of the big game changes that happened is Western artillery coming in, which has a longer range than the Russian artillery, and HIMARS. HIMARS are these rocket systems. I think they've got about 20 of these shoot and scoot, which these rocket systems on the back of basically a truck, a big truck. They can fire and then they can just drive off, and it means a counter battery. So when you fire, often you can then be triangulated, find out where you are, and then a counter battery will hit you and blow you up. So with shoot and scoot, you just can't be hit very easily at all, because you shoot and then you just jog on, and it's the range of these HIMARS is causing devastating impacts. So what happened is Ukraine said, right, we're going to have a counter attack in the Kherson region, and they announced this. And here's the Kherson region. Kherson's down here, and Crimea even further down here. So the Kherson region is here, and they said to Russia, "We're gonna attack you. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming." So what Russia did for the weeks before that, and these maps I've taken from War in Ukraine, great YouTube channel to check out, really good channel. What happened is Russia started removing a lot of their soldiers that they thought they could. They took an awful lot of soldiers, and there are differing accounts as to how many, but an awful lot of soldiers were moved from all these front lines in the Donbass region and moved into this Kherson region here. And this looked like a bizarre decision by Ukraine, because they're just inviting all these reinforcements from Russia. But what this meant is that Russia was piling in these troops into here, but at the same time, Ukraine were then using these HIMARS to hit, and actually all up and down all of here really, the HIMARS are being used, but a lot in the Kherson area to take out ammunition depots and supply depots predominantly, but also hitting a lot of anti-aircraft installations, air defense. It's called SEED operations. So as well as the Air Force from Ukraine hitting these air defense installments, the HIMARS were hitting them. And this was kind of shaping things to come. So it turns out that the supplies were really badly hit, and loads of key offensive and defensive weapons of the Russians were being hit badly as well. And this was looking like quite clever, but still, what's the long-term aim here? Then Ukraine did the genius thing, which is, you'll notice there's a big old river here, Dnipro River, which goes from the coast up to this sort of artificial lake area. And what they would, I think that's an artificial lake, and what Ukraine were doing is that there were only really 3 bridges that cross here. There's a dam and two other bridges, a rail bridge, and Ukraine hit these bridges and took them out. And so over the last couple of weeks, they've hit them. Russians have repaired them, hit them. Russians have repaired them, hit them, hit them, hit them. And now I think they're pretty much done. What this means is that Russia have rushed in all of their reinforcements to this area of land here, and this has meant that these troops are now trapped in this area because the bridges have been blown up and they can't get it. This is a pretty sizable river. They can't get across there. So as a result, it looks like the Ukrainians have entrapped, like a honeypot. They entrap these soldiers. So not only with the existing forces here, but a whole bunch of reinforcements are now unable to retreat back to Kherson, which is here, and to this land the Russians occupy. And in fact, they can't also be resupplied with ammunition and supplies in general, food, and all the things they're going to need to fight an active front. So that's a first bit of genius. I mean, this is absolute genius because they have entrapped the Russians and then can now just pick them off. And what's happened is that they are attacking at 3 points along this front. So at the north, in the middle, and here down the south. And what that does is it spreads out the defence so that the defence can't... If they only attack, say, in the middle, the Russians would rush all of the troops they could to fight off that one attack. But attacking in multiple places means they have to stay, on their feet. And what's happened is that the Ukrainians have advanced, albeit fairly slowly, down the middle here. There's a road that goes all the way down to here, which leads onto this fresh water provision down to Crimea. So if the Ukrainians can split the Russians here, then and possibly split them several ways, they can slowly just suffocate and annihilate the forces that remain, and it looks like that's what they're doing. And so there's been a settlement up here, which is a pretty major town that's been retaken. There's some places around here that have been retaken up the northern area, and also in the middle here. And they're pivoting to find the path of least resistance, so that they end up cutting the Russian forces apart, and you're getting sort of stories of lots of surrenders. I mean, it is costing the Ukrainians. So really, if you're doing an offensive, you should be working on a ratio of at least, to be safe, you would want 5-1. Attackers to defenders, and they don't really have the forces for that. So this is why this is genius, which is if you don't have the forces to do an outright sort of, overrun the enemy, then you lock them in and pick them off. And they're using artillery and HIMARS to do that. And now, because they have destroyed the enemy, the Russian air defense, they are being able to fly drones, Bayraktar drones, and their own air force quite high and fairly freely over this area, because the Russians just don't have the capability of taking them down. So then they can be picked off by the air as well as by artillery, and as well as by multiple rocket launchers. It's absolutely brilliant, and they've got nowhere to go. They are backed up against a huge river they can't cross, and any pontoon and ferry terminals that they try and get operational are just being picked off by the Ukrainians. And then if the Ukrainians can do this, then they will be able to cut off the water supply to Crimea, and that is massive. So this is a really big move, but the genius doesn't stop there. What if we go back to Ukraine as a whole? What happened is the Russians removed loads of their troops from these areas to go and support this, to go and defend the counteroffensive that the Ukrainians had announced. What this has meant is that all these lines are fairly weak compared to what they were. Now, the rumours tonight are that the Ukrainians have done a counterattack in 3 places in particular: Kharkiv, Izium, which is an area that a bridgehead that the Russians took that really helped their supply lines, and they've crossed. The Ukrainians have crossed back over the Severodonetsk River. Unopposed, I think they did that the other day, and now I think they're taking a settlement on the other side. The end result is all the troops have been sidelined. Russian troops, a load of the Russian troops have been sidelined down in the Kherson Oblast, to the point that they're now weak in many places around here. So the Ukrainians appear to have been secretly sort of reinforcing these troops ready for counter offensives up here. We know that there have been a lot of reinforcements on the way because the UK have been training sort of 10,000. There are lots being trained in very technical forms of warfare throughout Europe and even in America. And these are now going to be being rotated into fighting on these fronts. Now, the genius doesn't even stop there, because it appears that the Ukrainians have attacked in 3 particular places, and they are particular because the defenders there aren't your Russian Spetsnaz or like special forces or airborne divisions who are better fighters. These are the LNR and DNR forced conscripts mainly. What does that mean? Well, it means that when Russia took over these 2 areas of the Donbass, the Donetsk and Luhansk, they were using, since 2014, they've been using 2 sort of military, 2 armies of pro-Russians in these 2 areas, the DNR and the LNR, so the People's Republic, if you like, armies. Generally not as good as a Russian sort of main army and so on and so forth, but they are fairly battle-hardened over 8 years of fighting. But as they've been losing troops and troops and troops, what they've been doing is, in the areas they've taken, they have forced conscripted many people, which is, making people fight for them who don't want to fight, who have low morale and very low training. Really poor quality army, poor quality militia, if you like. And it appears that the Ukrainians have attacked in the places where they are mainly stacked with those troops, the LNR and DNR troops, which means they have really low morale, really low quality training, not very good soldiers, and they're much easier to overrun. Now, if this was planned right from the beginning, this is absolutely brilliant. Who knows how far it's going to go, because it depends how many troops the Ukrainians have at their disposal and the ammunition and logistics. So, how much weaponry and, and all the logistical support for that, and fuel, ammunition, spare parts, all this stuff. How much of that stuff do the Ukrainians have at their disposal? Because, really they'd want to be pretty incisive here. Anyway, I just thought, that's absolutely fascinating. So Russians have so many places now to think about what they can do. Do they try and exfiltrate their troops down in the Kherson region, or do they defend all along the front line where they're I mean, all these other places, of course, the Ukrainians are still fighting, and it's a kind of a bit of a stalemate. There are areas, Bakhmut, where the Russians are doing fairly well, but generally, there's a lot of fierce fighting going on all around. And so, wherever they look, the Russians are in trouble. And this is why, they really needed to have mobilized, but obviously Putin doesn't want to do a mass mobilization of the nation, because actually it looks like the war is becoming increasingly unpopular with his people, and so therefore that will just show that A, they're losing, and B, it will be a vote loser. Not that anyone votes there, because it's a dictatorship. So there you go. Here's a bit. This is the Institute, the Study of War. A really good Twitter handle to follow. You can see some areas around here where the Ukrainians have have made some inroads into the Russian lines. The Bakhmut areas where the Russians are doing fairly well, and there's some fierce fighting down in these places. But here, I think, is where the Ukrainians are doing a counter-offensive. I may be wrong, but crossing a river there in that area. So yeah, lots of stuff going on, and it is all quite exciting if you are pro-Ukraine. Uh, they've done a media blackout so that down here it's very difficult to get information about what's going on, and for good reason, because as soon as people start posting it on social media, then the Russians know where it's coming or where to do counterattacks or whatever. So information, there have been occasions on both sides where people have posted things, and the operational security, as it's known, OPSEC, has been poor and porous, and it's led to deaths and disaster. So they've done a media blackout on Kherson, which means it's very difficult to find out exactly what's going on there, and whether it's grinding and very, very slow, or whether they're making a bit more of a quicker progress. We just don't know. But given the news of all the rumours of these other three prongs, it's all looking quite interesting, and the news is certainly a lot better now than it was 2 weeks ago for the Ukrainians. They did say that August, September was where it was going to happen. They want to get stuff done before the bad weather and the freezing weather sets in. That will be more beneficial for the Russians, I would have thought. So it would be very useful for the Ukrainians to make some inroads in the autumn period. But anyway, there you go. There's a bit of what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, I follow loads of people on Twitter, loads of great Twitter handles to get a lot of information, and I do it daily. I'm still spending probably a good 2 hours a day, multitasking often, but finding out information on Ukraine. So it's still right. It's the number one concern I have on a daily basis. It's part of my daily routine. Anyway, thank you. If you've watched, if you found it interesting, let me know. Any questions or anything down in the comments. I am no expert. I'm just a random guy on the internet, but I am following this quite carefully, and I'd be very interested to see whether this was fully intended in the way it's panning out from the very beginning, or whether they're being opportunistic, which is still absolutely brilliant, seize those opportunities and use them very, very cleverly. I'd be really interested to know, and I'm sure it'll all come out in the wash. Challenge everything, particularly yourselves, and please like, subscribe, share any of my videos and to my channel. That's really, really great. Any thanks or support you can give to the channel, or join the channel, all the information is down there. Thank you very much. See you later.